Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 115. We're back with a US-based guest. We're going to take this show in a different direction today. You know, we've been talking about nutrition, health, performance in various different contexts, and we haven't really breached enough about, you know, the topic of kind of movement, the problems that we face, maybe typical pathways of pain, typical injuries, that kind of stuff. I know me and Rachel have ranted a lot in the past about the quality of physios that you usually see, especially in the UK, and how we kind of look at pain and movement traditionally and how we kind of treat it and probably never really get to the root cause of the problem. So I'm hoping this podcast is going to unravel another sort of layer of the onion while we look at kind of pain and movement today. So I have, from Stop Chasing Pain today, I have Perry Nickelston. Perry Nickelston, how are you? Hello.
I'm doing awesome, my friend. Thank you so much for having me on. I love your show.
You are welcome, sir. Well, we need to give everyone the baptism of fire, and you need to say, who on earth is Perry Nickelston, and what on earth led you to the path that you have taken today?
Wow, geez, how long is the podcast? Where do I start? Well, stop chasing pain is really the mission and the message that I have in life right now. And I came across what I'm doing now through my own personal experiences of being in physical pain, right? So I know what it feels like to have chronic pain and your life can be altered. And you just want to be able to do the stuff that you love. I think people take for granted very often to be able to do basic things in their life. And when it's taken away, it's all you want back. So I got into healthcare being a chiropractor many, many years ago because I was a kind of a lughead bodybuilder, man. I just was about putting on muscle and lifting heavy stuff and did dumb things lifting. And this is back in the 80s before we knew anything about corrective movements and exercises. Blew my back out doing a squat. And then I said what everybody else says, oh, maybe it'll go away. I'll just rest it. And then of course it did, because I'm young and you can bounce back from almost anything at that point. But I went and squatted again and the back blew out. Imagine that over and over. And then one time I couldn't walk. My body finally said, you know what? I've had enough of this dance. Now I'm going to really hurt you. Here it comes. And then I went to a chiropractor and they got me back up on my feet and fixed me at the time, at least took the pain away. So I decided, why don't I just do this? So I became one of the chiropractors and was doing that for many, many years. But my back pain still kept coming back, right? And then so I wanted to ask myself, why do these conditions that we treat when they're painful, which is what we should do, right? I mean, we want to get out of pain, but I was always fascinated. Well, why does this stuff keep coming back? It started to piss me off, actually. So then I looked for a linchpin. I'm like, what is the one thing in common that every single human being does that can physically do it? Because we've all got different lifestyles. We got different habits. We got stuff that we love to do or we hate to do. But the answer is we move. So we're designed to move. We're created to move. We don't move as much as we should. And when we do, it's poor movement patterns. So I began to look at how does each person move who is in pain, and how are they moving when they're not in pain? And I put the link together that looking at movement patterning was the linchpin for me. And when I began to practice the movement restoration patterns for myself, my back pain started to go away. And there's no cure for pain, right? I mean, it's just a part of life. But the idea is to try to do things in our life so we can prevent it from coming back. And if it does come back, that it's not as bad or doesn't last as long. So if anybody tells you they're going to cure pain, they're lying to you. Can't do it. But you can hopefully prevent it and make you more what I like to call a badass, which is, you know, life is fun and enjoyable. And if you love to do CrossFit, I'm going to help you do that stuff better, faster, harder, stronger, longer. If you want to run, I'm going to do the same thing. So it's whatever lights your fire in life in regards to movement. My goal is to help you do that better and without pain.
Good.
And I think the name speaks for itself. Stop chasing pain. So we treat the side of pain absolutely positively because it's telling you, your body is telling you something is wrong here. But I want to know why you got it. So I treat both, where you hurt and where you don't hurt.
Okay. It's straight away, it's nice to hear a practitioner that has no dogma around what people want to do with their training and their life, because I definitely think this comes with maturity. I spoke about this about 3 podcasts ago with my co-host, and when we're very young in the industry, we have a lot more dogma about, I do it this way, and there's a bit of research to say that this is the right way. So you shouldn't train like this, you should train like this instead. And straight away we get into the crux, for me, of why we do all this stuff in health and nutrition, which is the fact that we try and move better to avoid pain and do the things that we enjoy in life, whether it's running or table tennis or CrossFit or bodybuilding. It doesn't really matter, because it's about the individual and what they enjoy. And to be honest, what people do will probably never ever be perfect. But we're trying to live a life that's fulfilling, and you're just trying to do that by, I suppose, treating people's movements and working around pain.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about movement is it transcends every sport that you want to do. So when I look at you move and I look at these patterns, you can be a football player, or you can play table tennis, or you can play chess. I mean, I don't care. I mean, you're using the same muscular system and sling system and nervous system to do all. It just depends on what level you're at. And I got news for you. Everything works for somebody, man. Mm-hmm. So every technique is going to transcend and be able to help somebody in some way. So you got to remember that we're dealing with living, breathing human beings that they enjoy what they do. And for me to tell you that, oh, that's bad or that's not good, I mean, already I'm starting off the wrong way when I look at you and I assess you. So instead of me trying to prevent you from doing what you love, how about I just show you ways to help you do it better? Mm-hmm. Or maybe you have a linchpin somewhere and maybe your technique is off and you've got to work with a coach for your technique. Then that's where you work with a specific coach for your sport, like tennis. Maybe your swing is off. But I'm going to look and see, can your body physically give you the ability to do that swing and do it efficiently? So once I know you can, well, then that's when I work very closely with other team members, because I'm not a running coach. I mean, I hate to run. I don't run unless even if you're chasing me, I don't run. It's just something I don't like to do. But I'm not a running technique person. But I'm going to look and see, do you have the ability with your body to perform the pattern that you're trying to do? And it doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be painful. If you have pain, I know you don't. Mm-hmm. But pain is the last thing to hit you, not the first thing to hit you. And very rarely, if ever, is X marks the spot of pain. So if you fall, for instance, and you hit your knee, well, that's not rocket science, man. I know why your knee hurts. But if you come in and you say, hey, I've got like this knee pain, or called jumper's knee, or whenever I do a jump squat or a box squat, my knee hurts. Well, then I know that you have knee pain, but I know you've got a movement problem somewhere that I've got to discover why the knee is what I call bleeding energy or bleeding force. So it's hurting in my mind because something somewhere else is not doing enough. So the thing that really blows people's minds is, I say, the site of pain is usually the area that is the most functional site that you have. It's usually hurting because it's pissed off and it's tired of working. So we look for another area that is not doing its job, that we call it's asleep at the wheel, that it's not pulling its weight, hiding in the background, and everybody chases where the pain is. And sometimes it's that easy. I mean, if you treat the side of pain and it doesn't come back and it goes away, well, that's awesome. That's what we want to do. But if it doesn't, in my eyes, you owe it to yourself and to your patient to look somewhere else, assuming that something is not permanently damaged, because sometimes tissue is damaged beyond repair and you can only take it back to a certain extent, or maybe you do need surgery. I mean, like if you need a meniscus surgery and it's torn too bad, there's no amount of movement pattern I'm going to be able to show you to bring that back, because pain changes your brain and changes how you move. So there's no other society, I think, that can help people in regards to emergency medicine, than we have in this country and across the world. But once that job is done, then that's kind of where our playground takes over.
Sure.
Then we look at movement. Yeah.
So really, I suppose that's what you summarise with your statement, movement never lies. That whatever happens, if someone doesn't move properly, whether they have pain now or not, at some point they're going to develop pain or an injury because there is a biomechanical insufficiency or an imbalance somewhere in the system. So
Right.
with that in mind, give me a little insight that when you're looking at someone, what are you assessing? Someone walks into you right now, straight away, what are the things that you really want to look at and maybe you see as common issues in a lot of people?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the movement never lies is a great quote that came from Martha Graham, who's a very brilliant dancer and dance teacher. And I found that statement resonated with me because it is true. Like, people can say things to you, sometimes lying to you on purpose, right? Especially if you're an athlete, you don't want to be taken out of a game and you don't want to stop. So you say, I'm fine. I'll just push through it. It's not that bad. So I know it. But if I see you move, I can watch how your facial expression changes or your eyes and your body just has a tell, for instance. But a lot of times people forget things in the past traumas that may be so emotional that their nervous system and their brain puts it in the subconscious and they literally don't remember.
Mm.
But if I see you move, your subconscious remembers through movement, right? So say, for instance, if you sprain your ankle 15 years ago and you fell out of a tree or something, but you don't remember that because the pain's gone, right? But if I see you squat and then I see you shift off to the opposite side and you're just not using that ankle efficiently the way I want to, then I'm going to probe a little bit. So I know something at some point had happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
So the body is designed to adapt. I mean, that's survival. So you're going to have compensations and you're going to have things that are not perfect. There's no such thing as perfect movement. I mean, who decides that anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's just a benchmark for us to have a ground starting point. So I look for basic parameters of functional human movement. So I put you through about 7 basic movements when you come to see me that everybody should be able to perform to a certain degree to be considered what I call functional. That functional means that you can do a desired task where maybe it's just bending over to pick up groceries or something, or lifting your kid up, not necessarily having to deadlift 500 pounds off the floor. So when I see how you do those patterns and how well you can do them, then I know kind of where your nervous system and where your brain is. I do a lot with neuroscience and the brain in regards to movement because this controls everything.
Sure.
So when I look at movement, it's just a barometer of where I would like you to be. I'm not trying to fit you into a mold of a cookie cutter, like you should be able to look like this in a squat, because maybe you just can't get there. All right. But that's the end goal. And I compare it to blood pressure. When I take blood pressure, ideally you want 120/80, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the one that everybody thinks is where you should be. Well, if you have something that's 150/100, it doesn't mean you're going to drop dead of a heart attack. I mean, but you certainly have a higher risk factor of dropping down when you go. But I've got people that have 120/80 and they go running and they're dead the next day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't know. But I want to try to strive to get you into that because we know that, hey, if your lifestyle habits of the way you move, like the things that you choose to eat in your world, I mean, it's going to have repercussions at some point down the line because eventually your body may run out of the ability to adapt or to compensate. And that's what pain is. Pain to me is your nervous system saying, I have tried as best as I can to compensate for this dysfunction. I've tightened stuff up here. I've loosened stuff up there. I've disengaged things here. And I've cheated. And I can't do it anymore. So I need help. And it lets you know it needs help by sending you the universal signal of help, which is pain.
Okay, coming back to movement, you talked about the squat and how people move off from side to side, that kind of thing. See, people can try and glean some information of their own movement from this interview today.
Hmm.
What are some of the things that maybe people listening should say, well, I need to make sure I can kind of do this properly? What are the things that you're commonly seeing that, like, let's say, for example, like in the UK, we're always talking about how much we sit on our ass. We sit on our ass all the time,
Yeah.
and physios are saying, oh, a lot of people have tight hip flexors and tight thoracolumbar fascia and etc. etc. Is there a few things that you can say, yeah, I see this an awful lot. If you were to take anything away from today, I think you should stretch probably this, make sure you're doing that. Maybe get someone to have a look at your X movement, and I reckon that would help you move a little bit better without even consulting a physio, chiropractor, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a big question.
It is.
Yeah. So, well, I think the physios are right. I mean, it's a thing that happens in the United States too. I mean, we sit on our ass, and the glutes go to sleep because we don't use them that well, and the hip flexors, of course, can certainly tighten up because you're just getting the torso closer down to your thighs, and we don't when we walk. Another big thing that's happening now is this smartphone cell phone generation. So we're clamped in like this doing this on a phone, so when we walk or we move, we lose rotation now, which is the key movement pattern that people need to be able to do, because that's how you transmit force from one side of the body to the other. And when you lose that ability, force just bleeds out in other places that usually going to get pain. So I do look at some basic patterns for people. And the very first test that I'll have everybody do is an overhead squat test. It's kind of a barometer of how well you can control your body. Because when you move, it's just movement is a control of force, period, right? So you got to fight gravity all the time. So when you move, you have to have mobility, which is the ability to actually move something. So like my wrist needs to move with mobility. And if it's stuck and locked down, it doesn't move well because maybe the joint's locked down or the tissue is tight. When I go to use it, it's just going to stop, right? So it can't transmit force through here effectively. So your body has to choose a different path to take it in. So if you go down into a squat, for instance, most people have ankles that don't move well. They don't bend in the ankle because they're sitting all day long. And so when you squat down, the ankles don't move, then your brain says, damn, I mean, I can't get down here, so I got to cheat. So it leans forward. So you don't fall, because it's all about survival with your brain. Your body's got one goal in life, and that's not to be dead. It doesn't care about anything else. It doesn't care how you look. It doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't care how deep you can go in a squat. When it squats down, it goes, oh, shit, I'm stuck. I can't get anymore. I don't want to hurt myself. Your ankles don't move, so I'm going to lean forward. Okay? And then so where you move tells me where you go for safety and protection and where you can't go into. So you have to have the mobility, but you also have to have what we call stability. Stability is the ability to control that movement under change. And anytime you move, that's a change in your environment, right? So stability is what I look at the most in people. So stability, I think, is the missing component in people's movement patterns and their correctives. So we could say, yeah, okay, well, if you can't do an overhead squat, for instance, if you're not stable and you can't control movement well, your brain just freaks out and it says, man, I'm not stable here. I'm not going to let you move because you're going to get hurt. So then it tightens you up, right? So in my world, if something doesn't move well, like your ankle or your hip or your neck or your spine, that means you've got decrease in mobility, right? But then I always ask, well, why the hell do you have a decrease in mobility? You follow me? Why did your brain make your ankle not move much? And it did it because it doesn't have the ability to control it. It doesn't have stability. So a decrease in range of motion is stability. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So your brain is making you stable one way or the other. And it's doing it from jamming something up. So where people run into problems in my world is you say, okay, I'm doing an overhead squat and you can't get down. We're going to have to stretch your hips, loosen up your hips, stretch your ankles, mobilize your ankles. You gave you some thoracic spine, mid-back movement. So I'm giving you all of this mobility, but then your brain has no idea what to do with all that mobility, so it can't control it to make it stable. So when people go back to those movements again, they just lose the mobility over and over and over again. So you give the mobility there, but you don't teach the body how to work with it and how to control it, and then it just goes right back. So it's this dance with loss of mobility through soft tissue restrictions or through fascia or through joints. So what I do with movement is I think everybody's got a stability problem. They just don't know it yet. So it always comes down to a stability issue. So anytime I do stretching or mobilization work or anything like that, I always do some stabilization exercises or correctives right after that.
Okay.
And then I get you moving again. So I would never just have you do an overhead squat, put you down on the ground and stretch you and open up everything and then have you do an overhead squat again, because it's way too much for your body to control. And then you'll lose the squat again over time.
So talking about stability, how the muscles work, is this one of the reasons why the data on stretching has changed quite a bit, especially before people play sport? Because, you know, theory or common sense would say, well, if we're a bit tight, let's have a stretch. But there's obviously a relationship between your muscles. Let's just take the hamstring and the quad. There's a relationship there of tension because it needs a certain amount of stability to control the movement pattern that you have right now. So if I change that relationship, let's say for a lot of people, they aggressively stretch their hamstrings before, you know, me as a rugby player, all the boys are trying to stretch their hamstrings before a game. It's like, oh, that's the muscle. If anything, it makes me feel less explosive. It makes me feel less coordinated because I've changed the tension relationship in my muscles. And that tension relationship at that point in time was a happy relationship because it was like that to allow me to function optimally.
Correct. Yeah, you are right. So, you know, there's new information coming out all the time about trying to help people move better and get out of pain. And so stretching is something that people are looking at right now. But I look at any stiffness or tightness in your body, from a muscle to fascia to a joint, okay? That's a neurological sign. So anytime you have stiffness or tightness, that's your nervous system trying to stabilize something. It's trying to compensate. All right. So let's take the hamstring, for instance. So if my hamstrings are tight, I could absolutely stretch them. But I'm asking, okay, why in the hell are my hamstrings tight? So my hamstrings are tightening up because they're probably working for something else that's not able to do its job effectively. So your brain just uses your hamstring more, right? So the brain falls back on muscles and patterns that it can depend on, whether they're functional or dysfunctional. So muscles that are dysfunctional when you're moving are actually functional for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what your body needs right now to be able to accomplish its task. So it's dysfunctional, but it's functional. So it's called functional dysfunction. But I want it functional as best I can. So then I think, okay, because the brain doesn't work and use individual muscles. That doesn't happen. So your hamstrings don't work in isolation all by themselves. So they have to work with everything from what's on the back part of your whole body. Like, what's another muscle that should be working on that backside is your glute max or your rear end, right? So if your glute max doesn't extend your hip well enough when you walk or when you're going to bridge, like up with a single leg glute bridge, then your brain just says, okay, well, my butt doesn't work efficiently, so my glutes work. If they didn't work, you wouldn't be able to stand up. But they don't work efficiently. So in your brain, when it needs to go to something right away, like, bam, I got to do this movement. I need some stuff I can depend on. If the ass is asleep, then your brain says, okay, forget you. I'm going to use the hammies. So the hammies do the movement of the glute, right? So it's accomplishing that task. So you can stretch the hamstrings, but if you don't get in and then start to turn on and activate what should be working, then your body's just going to go right back to using the hamstring again. And it's interesting. So the hamstrings are extremely important with controlling your pelvis, posterior tilt your pelvis, right? And your glute max does that as well. and so does your rectus abdominis and your obliques, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all those things have to work as a pattern to tilt your pelvis. So what happens if one doesn't work well? Then the brain just goes and it uses another one of those other groups more. And what I find with people who have tight hamstrings is very often their abs are not engaging properly. So the rectus abdominis has some inhibition on it. The glute max has inhibition on it because you're sitting on it. And the obliques don't work because people don't rotate anymore when they walk. So all the muscles that are going to tilt your pelvis backwards, your internal oblique, your external oblique, your rectus abdominis, and your glute max, there's 4 that probably don't work well. What's left over?
Hamstring.
The hamstring. So the hamstring's doing the work of all those other guys plus its own, and it's pissed. And when you go in and you stretch that, what you're doing is you're taking away the only mechanism that's keeping you functional. So you're taking away the stability of the tightness in the hamstring. And if you don't teach the body how to use all those other 4 things that it's not using, well, when you stand up and you want to run, and running is maximum stabilization. So I'm going to stretch my hamstrings down on the ground, then I'm going to stand up and I'm going to load the shit out of my body, and it can't handle it. So your brain just goes, bam, hamstrings, tighten up again. So it's the brain going back to safety and stability. Let's go even further. So that's on the same side of muscles that tilt the pelvis backwards, but you also have to look at the muscles that tilt the pelvis forward, right? So the pelvis is supposed to be this big, stable base that we're able to move on, right? But a lot of times what you'll have is people that don't have psoas that works well, and they don't have quads that work well in the front. So those are called functional opposites of the hamstring. So they do the opposite work of what the hamstring does. So what if those guys don't work? Then the hamstring has nothing to counterbalance it in the front side. So the hamstring's doing all the work back here of everything that should tilt it backwards, and it's got nothing that should tilt it forward to counterbalance it. So then it just says, dude, I'm just going to do everything. So when I see tight hamstrings, you should never, ever, ever stretch any kind of muscle in your body until you figure out what other muscle pattern is it working with when it gets tight that may not be functioning well. Does that make sense?
It does. If I think of me firsthand, when people look at my squat, because I sit down a lot, I squat and they're like, "Oh, we need to stretch out your hip flexors," and I say to them, if you stretch out my hip flexors, my squat strength will go down 10 to 20%. There'll be a big jump in my strength loss. And they'll sort of stand there and sort of scratch their head. And I'm like, my movement right now is accounting for what is making me as strong as possible. We're going to have to go outside that. We're going to have to probably stretch my psoas outside my training session. And then, like you say, look at function, stability, and why it's doing it.
And you only see that with movement, right? So, I mean, you could say, okay, well, maybe you've got a tight hip flexor, but is it tight and weak or tight and strong? That makes a total difference on what you're going to be doing. And what other relationships does the psoas have in different patterns? So the psoas is going to function very differently in a squat pattern than it's going to function in a single leg stance. Right? So I have to look at all these different patterns, how you squat, how you do a single leg stance, how you can do a lunge, how you rotate, anything. So then once I see all these different patterns, I can see what your body likes to use and what it doesn't like to use. So if you keep in mind that if a muscle doesn't function well, and it has some inhibition in it, which means, like we said before, it works, but it just doesn't work efficiently. Your body and your brain crave efficiency. And they want to take the path of least resistance to accomplish a movement. So if you're going to do a squat and something's going to be difficult to do or it's going to run into a roadblock, your brain says, well, I'm going to go around that roadblock. I'm going to go a different way. So if you have any muscles that are inhibited or don't function well, then your brain's not going to use it. It's going to go to something else and use that because that's got your body's back. And if you think about it like the body, if this guy over here doesn't work well, and I use this one all the time because this one's got my back, which one do you think is going to start to get pissed off? And which one do you think is going to start hurting? This one. the one that you're using all the time, right? And then guess where people start to look and they start to treat?
Yeah.
Over here.
Exactly.
Yoo-hoo, there's pain here. That this must be where the problem is. No, pain only tells you there is a problem, doesn't tell you what it is. So you treat here, but you also treat where? Over here.
Over here.
This is the part that people are missing. This stuff here, forgive my language, this shit is easy. Treating pain ain't rocket science. I mean, if it hurts here, let me rub it, let me drop a needle in there, let me laser and stuff like that, right? If that works, great. If it doesn't, I know automatically I'm not just looking here, I'm looking here. And it doesn't, this shoulder is connected to the opposite side of your body, right? Last time I checked, when you move one arm, the other one's got to go with it. So we look at function to see how this shoulder that's hurting relates to function everywhere else in the body. And I can only see that when you move. I can't see it on a table.
Sure.
Because on a table, you're not moving. And guess what? On a table, you don't need any stability. You're just sitting there. Like when we're sitting in through here, you need minimal stabilization requirements. But when you stand up, you need it all.
Okay, so you've mentioned stability an awful lot. And I think I want to try and almost classify it for people to help them out. How do you train stability? Because the fitness industry has evolved through its variations of what stability is. Now, I remember when I was doing my personal training qualifications, I did a lot of work through the Czech Institute, and Paul Czech was a massive fan of rolling around on Swiss balls and, you know, doing all that kind of stuff. And then we sort of said, well, perhaps we need to do a bit less of that, and perhaps we need to actually just make a joint as strong as possible. So we need to focus more on compound movements, squatting, deadlifting, chinning, single leg RDLs, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, how do we train stability? What are we quantifying stability as in terms of gym work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. I mean, people, when they hear stability, it's like, where do I start? Right? So going on a stability ball or a BOSU ball is certainly training stability. But I think where we went crazy is that, you know, we think more is better, right? So I'm going to have you on a BOSU ball, but I'm actually going to turn it upside down now and put the dome underneath. And then I'm going to have you on there doing some squats with overhead presses and a rotation as I'm throwing a ball at you. I mean, so they think about all this stability is like, okay, I'm helping you. You're actually not, right? Because when you look at stability, you have to think like your brain and your nervous system. So I said before that your brain and your nervous system and your body just wants to feel safe. So I want you to think of the word stability as safety now. Okay, if you think about it like that, then it makes sense when you train it. So yes, I will do some stability challenge with that, but it's so far beyond your body's ability to learn new patterns because it's so worried about don't fall off the ball, don't get hurt, don't die. So it's going to cheat and do whatever it can to make you stable, right? But what I want to do now is I want to take you back down to where you feel very, very safe when I move you. And that's why I like Paul Czech's work a lot, because he does some great stuff with neurodevelopmental patterning and going through how, you know, babies learn to move, and then he gets his clients right into those patterns again. And they're very challenging when people get into them. But when you lay down on the ground, you automatically relax your whole body and your nervous system, and you immediately feel safer, right? Because you're not going to fall anywhere. You've got more of the body in touch with its surroundings. So when I get people in stability training, it just depends on where I start them. So I always start you on the ground where you feel safe, and then I begin to get you through patterns where I can see, are you moving from where I would like you to move from, or are you cheating from somewhere else? So then you can really feel the movements, because now you feel safe. It's almost, I jokingly say, it's kind of like your mom's giving you a hug saying, it's okay. You can begin to move and explore movement to where there is pain to where there's not pain. So anytime there's pain on board, you're not going to really learn a new pattern of movement, because the brain it pulls the body away. So I got to get you into patterns where it's right on the edge of pain and you kind of flirt with that, but then you feel comfortable. And very often I'll get you into patterns that don't hurt you at all. So you can begin to learn and move better. So if your right shoulder really, really hurts, I'll do a lot of work on your left shoulder because that'll feed over into the other side of the body with regards to movement. So I'll start with those, and then I'll watch each person that I'm working with. So if you're working in a gym setting, the easiest way that I tell people how you can determine what you're doing for a stabilization requirement in a corrective exercise pattern. I'm not talking about kicking your ass because you want a hard workout. That's very different. So if you want to see if someone can gain stability, let's take like a half kneeling position where there's one knee on the ground and then the other leg is forward. So you're half kneeling. So if I'm doing something there and maybe I want to have them do like a medicine ball throw to me from a half kneeling position. If I see that person, one, begins to hold their breath, they're not breathing appropriately through that light corrective pattern, then I know that that's too far beyond where their body needs to be, because they shouldn't have to hold their breath when I'm doing that corrective pattern for them. So that means that it's too much stabilization requirement, too much threat to the body. So if I'm in a half kneeling position, how could I make that more stable for the person so they can relax a little bit more? Well, then I'm going to put 2 knees on the ground instead of 1. So I'll go from half kneeling into tall kneeling. So now I've got 2 things on the ground, so I feel more stable. Then my nervous system and my brain will be, I'm a little more stable now. I'll give you this pattern, and then I'll go back to it, and then I'll watch and monitor and see, can you breathe now? Can you be able to do these patterns without cheating? So the number one way you can tell if a corrective exercise pattern for stability is too challenging is somebody holds their breath. Breath holding is a cry for stability in the body, and it's a cheat. So you're trying to gain stability by holding your breath when you should be able to do it from the muscles that I'm asking you to use. That's the easiest way for trainers when they get into corrective work is, can the person do the pattern without holding their breath? If they can't, then it's a pattern that's too far beyond where they need to be right now. If we're talking about correctives, if you want to deadlift something, you can breathe any damn way you want, right? Like 500 pounds off the floor, it's very different. But from a corrective pattern, that's what we want to look for. That's the biggest takeaway for stability, is looking at how somebody breathes.
Nice. I could see how that works 100%. Okay, so moving from like stability into movement as a general whole, if we look at people that are not in pain, so people that, just train on a regular basis and do their thing. This is a question from Duncan Cooper on Facebook, so thank you, Duncan. He said, how much attention should mobility get in someone's program? Should it be at the start of a session, the end of a session, on rest days? I know it will be specific to different people, that's a given, but let's say the average gym trainer, what should we be doing? Because, for example, me personally, I don't do a great doing mobility work. I get in, I have a warm-up, it's movement-based, I work on a few things that I know have restrictions, so I just kind of work movement into that area. And then a lot of the time I get going. I suppose I'm like a lot of people, unless I have pain, I don't overly focus on it.
Right. Yeah. Well, mobility work is something that's definitely important, right? I mean, it's going to kind of cycle back into what I talked about before, that if you have a decrease in mobility, and that can come from joints locking down with each other and also soft tissue tightness. So muscles get tight or fascia gets tight, things lock down and they just don't move. So you can get mobility from foam rolling, right? Or stretching, and some people get massage, things like that before they go and run on out. And so you do need to have mobility in order to be able to move, all right? So mobility before stability, they call that, right? But I'm still going to get back to if you have that lack of mobility, you've had a stability problem long before that. So I don't want you shouldn't be in the corner for 30 minutes doing all this mobility work, foam rolling my entire body, stretching all these kind of joints and stuff like that. Because one thing that will happen is you'll get all that mobility and you'll stand up and you'll say, I'm ready to go, right? So you haven't earned the stability yet. So it needs to be a mixture of the two. So say for instance, you notice, I don't rotate well in my thoracic spine, like a loss of rotation. I don't extend well. So you could get down on the ground and do like a foam roll. You can do that before you get up and you start to work out because you want to get that mobility back, right? But I would want to give some stability first for that thoracic spine that I just gave some mobility to. So for me in my world, I'm going to do stuff down on the ground. So say I don't rotate well on my thoracic spine, I can't extend well. I'm going to foam roll that spine, then get some rotation in the spine, and then I'm going to have you down on the ground, and I'm going to say, okay, I want you to roll from your back to your stomach and your stomach from your back, and just get like a basic rolling pattern to be able to use the spine and use these patterns of muscles in the body here, okay? And then I'm going to have you get up and do what you want to do. So anytime you gain mobility somewhere, you absolutely positively have to gain stability. That's why I like these full body pattern ones, because the size of the body with this X pattern, that's how you transmit force. So I'm not just going to have you release your thoracic spine and then just not do anything to pull the rest of the body into that movement. Because if you're gonna say, for instance, stand up and then push a sled, well, that's basically a rolling pattern on the ground, but you're standing up, right? Because you're using your arms and your legs. So all I want to do is I'm going to have you just kind of do that movement pattern down on the ground before you load it up and you do it pushing a heavy sled when you go. So yes, you could do mobility work before, but you have to do stability work right after that. And then same thing afterwards. Usually I'll have people do some stretching or some cool down work after they're done, but I'll also do stability work at the end. Very often I have people do these stability work, in between exercises when they're training as well, depending on where they are in the continuum. Does that make sense? So say, for instance, if your ankle doesn't move, I'm going to get some ankle range of motion in there with stretching, foam rolling, mobilize it with the band. But then I'm still going to have you do, for instance, like a rolling pattern or a crawling pattern, because now what I'm doing is I'm teaching your ankle how to work in conjunction with the entire rest of your body, which is what I want to teach it.
So I suppose really what you're saying is if you're a chronic mobilizer, if you never look at stability, you'll always be a chronic mobilizer and never have that problem resolved, because the lack of mobility is creating stability. So we need to look at the stabilized issue. So if you go in every day and you foam roller everything in your legs, you'll always foam roller everything in your legs unless we look at the stability in your legs.
Correct. Yes. So your body's going to give you stability one way or the other. And muscle tightness, fascial tightness, joint jams, all that is stability. That's how I look at it. That's a nervous system's cry for stability. So I'm going to give you mobility back, but let me give you the ability to now get the stability from where you should be getting it from. And it's proximal stability for optimal distal mobility. So again, let's go back to the ankle. If you have an ankle that keeps locking down and you've done everything to your ankle, well, then maybe I should look and see how you're transmitting force in your core. So very often you have a joint jam in your ankle because your oblique muscles, your rectus abdominis and your transverse abdominis and your core don't keep you stable. You can't rotate well. So then the body says, well, I'm not very stable in the top, so I'm not going to give you a lot of movement in your ankles, because if I do, you're going to freaking hurt yourself. So the loss of mobility is a safety mechanism for your body to try to prevent you from getting hurt. And then when you go in there and you give it all that range of motion back, you're actually increasing your risk of injury, because you took away the compensation mechanism of your body, because your body doesn't lock down joints for the hell of it. I mean, it's not doing it because it's bored. It's doing it for a reason. You just got to figure out what it is. And once I see you move, I can tell what it is, because movement never lies, right?
Okay, so there was a few other questions that are posted on Facebook, and some of them got quite specific. I think you've already answered this question, but I will read it anyway. And if there's something that you want to point out as an extra, in terms of this man-specific problem, then we'll go for it. So James Kerwin asked the question, what is Perry's advice on dealing with jumper's knee? I've also been told the right side of my hip is anteriorly tilted. I've iced it, stretched it, foam rolled it. This solves the pain on the short term but not long term. I've pre-season starting soon for Gaelic football and wonder what he recommended to help me be fit to train without pain and how to get rid of jumper's knee. Now, before you answer, I have a different question, which is a question that I thought of. When we look at pain and function, obviously a lot of people would usually go to a physiotherapist to look at getting this sorted. I don't have a huge amount of physios that I recommend because there's not enough people that, for me, like you're saying, look outside of what is pain. Now, what James has pretty much just asked is, who should I go and see to help sort this problem out? And that will probably answer my question on who do you recommend seeing, especially for people that are listening to this in the UK, to go and get help with these kind of problems.
Well, that's a good question. But I think it's a little different in the UK as opposed to here in the United States, right? In regards to what people can do as fitness trainers with touching people or working with people. Here in the United States, I mean, it's like hands off, right? And if pain's on board, they tell you to seek medical help.
We're all good over here. We just pick up the hammer and give it a knock somewhere.
Sledgehammer, right?
Yeah.
It always works. So I like to empower people as best as I can to try to tackle stuff on their own sometimes. But if you have a great network of people that you're working with, so when they say go to somebody who's a healthcare professional, that's the hard part because not everybody knows the same amount of information. So if you look at what he had here in regards to he's icing it, he's stretching it, he's foam rolling it. So he's doing a lot of things that he might normally get when he goes to a physio, for instance, right? I think we kind of innately know what we got to do to an area, or they may get some exercises in through there to do that. So, and of course, if your degree of pain is so bad that you can't function, well, then you got to get medications. So either pain medications, anti-inflammatories, injections. People think, I'm anti-medicine. Absolutely not. I mean, if your arm is hanging off and you're hurt, you're not coming in to see me for a movement pattern. Or if you're in so much pain that you can't function, you have to get that settled down and then move into there. So when I do movement patterning as well, I deal with a specific person that I'm working with. So they say, okay, if I have jumper's knee or it hurts when I do this particular movement. So what I'm going to do is get him into a movement. So, and then show me where it hurts and when it hurts. And then I start to think about, okay, what do you really need to function well in this pattern? What's got to function at optimum for me to have a nice pattern? And if the area that's hurting is usually compensating for that. So let's think about jumper's knee, right? I mean, there's something that's going to hit, obviously, if you think about logically with squatting and jumping up and landing. So I'm thinking about what do you need in order to function well in that pattern? And so it could be your quad, it could be your glutes, it definitely could be your core. So then if that knee is hurting, that side of pain is working for something that should be doing more. So if somebody's got a pain in that knee, say it's below the patella that's in there, then I'm just going to say that that's probably doing the work of your butt and your quad and your core, because they can't stabilize when you land or you pivot. So then you've got this small part of your knee that's doing everything. So I'm going to look for what should be functioning in the big daddies up here in the core, and they're probably not working well. And that's why your knee is doing all the work. So yeah, you can do that stretching and icing and stuff like that, but you've got to look higher up inside the core. And once I see you move, then I know when I see that knee or that body part that hurts, where it comes into play in a movement. Does it move too fast? Does it move too late when you go there? So when I've seen that with a jumper's knee, the biggest thing that I've found as the culprit of that is glutes don't work, quad doesn't work, and then the rectus abdominis and core doesn't work. Usually one of the obliques, if not both of the obliques,
Okay,
that don't work.
So obviously people can take a certain amount of information away from that. I suppose to answer my other question about practitioners that can help us with this kind of stuff, what can we? I suppose what kind of questions can we ask a physio? What kind of qualifications can we look for this physio to have that might be a better skilled individual? For example,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of ART. And when I look for like a massage therapist, I'll try and look for one that knows the principles of ART and myofascial release, because the chances are they're going to get me pain-free way quicker than a traditional therapist. So what would you kind of recommend on the movement side of things?
I definitely would try to look for someone that has some continuing education credentials outside of just physiotherapy school. All right. So, and I think that if you go and you even have an evaluation or an examination by someone, if they're not looking at things outside of where the site of pain is, or they're just giving you very general cookie cutter sheets of exercises for the injured body part that you probably knew to even do on your own, I don't think you're in the right place. So it'll all come down to, do they even watch you move? So I do a technique called the SFMA, the Selective Functional Movement Assessment, and that's a training where you look at patterns of the body and you treat where it hurts, but you treat where it doesn't hurt. And then people have that credentials as well. You can find in the UK. There's many different types of movement-based practitioners, from even the Czech. I've had people that have Czech certifications in the fitness world that know tons more than most general physicians in regards to musculoskeletal pain, right? But that's a world that you're living in and you're dealing with, not internal organ dysfunction like a medical doctor would. And then the same thing with anybody who has movement-based certifications. And ART is a great one. So they've got some extra training in working with the soft tissue of the body. But then I'm also going to look at somebody even beyond the ART of movement-based rehabilitation. So I think that it's very good to get involved with a network of people that you already know or that you trust. And then it's usually by referral quite often. So it's a crapshoot if you just pick one out of the book and you say, I've got pain, I'm just going to go see a PT person in my network, my insurance, or whatever you got. You never know what you're going to get.
I think if I was to summarize then, if I was to try and advise someone to go and see a practitioner of this nature, I would maybe phone them up, ask them about what they do and their qualifications. If they've got something like myofascial release, ART, that kind of experience, then for a starter, we can probably get an appointment with them and be confident that they would help us with some of their initial mobility issues and thus their initial pain issues. So it should hopefully alleviate pain. And then during that assessment, if we kind of get glimpses of that person saying, okay, let's have a little look at how you move, let's look at where the restrictions are, your tightness, your dysfunction, then you can probably say to yourself, this practitioner looks fairly good, I think we might get some good rehabilitation progress here. If the person doesn't do that, then you might say, okay, I'll see this guy, I'll let him get me out of pain, and then I'll go someone that's maybe a bit more Czech movement based, a bit more maybe a cross between an osteo and an S&C or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's very well said.
Cool.
Because even general physiotherapy is going to be helpful for people that are in pain. So if you go to somebody and you've had several visits and you're starting to get better, well, then you're on the right track, right? And then you can go and do more movement-based stuff with people or soft tissue things. And I think if you work with anybody who understands the fascial system, you're probably going to have somebody that understands how the body interconnects with each other. And then if you go to somebody and you're getting treatments and you're not getting better, and I say usually it's a 4-visit time frame for me, I have a slogan that's called Better in 4, Schedule No More, which means that if I can't make a positive change for the better in your pain or your movement pattern by 4 visits, then I'm probably not gonna. So then I'm going to refer you to somebody else that I think could get you there. Because I don't really fall back into it just takes more time, and let's give it a little bit more time for your body. If you're on the right track with something, your body will recognize that very quickly.
Sure.
And you'll know. If not, then it's not a matter of, well, let me just see. It's going to take like 8 more visits or something. I think that's going to be your benchmark when you go there. And if you get the same thing done to you every single time, that's another red flag. Should always be something new or something different added to the mix when you go.
Agree 100%. Okay. Perry, how are you doing for time? Because
I'm good, man. I'm
yeah,
good.
you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tom Bainsbridge asked a great question on Facebook, and we're now delving back into the brain, which you talked about earlier, which is a fantastic area of discussion, and we'll probably skim over it. He says, how do you manage to get over the mental side of injury recovery? I recently tore my hamstring deadlifting, and ever since I'm nervous pulling heavy weights because the tension in the muscles feel like it did before it hurts.
Yeah. That's a tough one, but it's absolutely critical to get over the mind body factor, right? So once you've been hurt, your body can have a fear of movement in general, and even when you don't have pain, sometimes you can just fear the anticipation of it, and you automatically tighten and stiffen up, and you actually breathe differently as well because breath holding is a sign of distress, right? So when you're very emotional, if you're scared or you're angry, notice how you're breathing. You're usually not, right? So that gets held into there. And so when you've had a past injury, especially something that's affected you psychologically from, it's just painful, but maybe it's something that took you out of the ability to compete, or you just couldn't get back to the same level when you were in pain. That's definitely there in that subconscious region of the body. So I actually have a lot of people, especially if they're competitive athletes, they work with a sports psychologist at the same time in regards to coming back from the pain part. But if I'm looking at working with them in my world, I want to, like I talked about before, get them comfortable with movements and patterns and gaining some powerful mobilization and stability, where they feel a little bit safer, and then their nervous system starts to let go. So if you've got the hamstring there and you're doing a deadlift, well, I'm going to start to do some stuff down on the ground first, make it challenging, and then work my way up. So your brain starts to say to itself, well, I think I'm going to be okay here. I'm feeling like I can take the brakes off and let go when I do that. So it's all about making them feel comfortable and safe, but also very aware. So I do a lot of work with pace of movement. So slowness of movement is very key for me, to put people through these patterns where we slow it down and just make you really aware of what your body's feeling, what it's not feeling, and when you're kind of coming up on that edge. And then it's what I call the neural edge, where you'll cross over, and then it's just this barrier that you have to play with in regards to fight or flight, where your system shuts down and you start to panic. It's all about perception, really. Pain is all subjective. So pain is not objective at all. It depends on the individual that you're working with, and pain is a request for change in the body. Usually, a change in how you move, which is a change in how you think. So your perception of what you're in can kick off the panic or pain. The easiest way I can describe that is if you've ever had somebody walk a line on the ground, right? One foot in front of the other, like put a piece of tape on the ground and walk it. And then, okay, I'm going to now have you go on this piece of tape, but I'm going to elevate it off the ground 3 feet. So it's the same line, but now you're 3 feet off the ground. So your perception of the movement and your fear factor totally changed, even though it's the same movement pattern. So I've just got to regress you back to where you can slowly build up to that, to where you're on the ground and you're 3 feet up, you still feel the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like anything, it's just progression, isn't it? And it's loading the tissues, feeling confident, and then at some point there's gonna have to be a plunge at some point where you kind of take the environment to the next level. And I think the hamstring is definitely one of those ones, because you get that feeling, you get that tension feeling in the hamstring. And I've torn a hamstring before, only once, and I remember, the first time you go to sprint, it's just you're cringing, you almost tighten up and almost expect it to happen, because you just get that tightness feeling. And I don't think there'll ever be a perfect answer to say that your brain's going to be scared of doing that. There's just going to be a trust point that you really go for it. And I remember when I did it, I was literally on the pitch and I just did 50%. I did 50% like 3-4 times until I was 100%, and then I did 65%, 70%, and I just built through it. And I built the range through it, and especially with gym work, because a lot of people that will listen to this will, be doing a lot of work in the gym, and that will be their main kind of exercise per se. Yeah, you're right. I don't think there'll ever be a magic answer.
No, it's really not. I mean, it's everybody's. They're bringing their own unique life history to it. Because when I talk with people about, say, coming back from an injury of a hamstring, I'll say, what's different from patient A's hamstring tear to patient B's hamstring tear? And the answer is totally different histories that you're bringing to the table. I mean, your hamstring and the other person's hamstrings may be, yes, similar anatomically, but they're not going to be anywhere near close in the patterning that you do, the life experiences that you're bringing to it, or your fear factor that you go in there. So even sometimes it's subconscious as well. That's this brake that's on in the back of your mind where you don't even know you've got the brake on because it's subconscious, and you won't turn on the juice, right? Because you've got this underlying fear of getting hurt. And that's what happens when you have muscle imbalance. Like when we talked about, if you have a muscle that has some inhibition into it, right? I mean, your nervous system is no way in hell your nervous system is going to allow you to get full neural juice and power and strength out of a muscle that has inhibition in it. It just won't do it because it knows it's going to get hurt. So it just bypasses it somewhere else. And then you bleed that energy. So it may not even be from an injury standpoint. When I talk about why I look at movement, it's not always about pain, right? I mean, it could be, but to me, it's about performance. Like they say, man, I already run great. And I've got this awesome time. And I'm like, I think you could probably be even better. You just don't even know it, right? So you got a break on you might not even realize is there. Or maybe you can do what you love better, faster, harder, stronger, longer, and durability, right? The average lifespan in the NFL is 3 years for a career.
Ouch.
Based on injuries, right? I mean, stuff's going to happen on the field. You just get hit. You don't know where it's coming from, and you have to actually kind of train for that, though. But if I can work with some movements and some patterning and things like that, and I can give you 5 years as opposed to 3, I mean, that's a win-win right there. And even in the world of professional athletes like sports, they're seeing that how much you can bench and how much you can leg press doesn't carry over to how you're going to perform on the field from an injury perspective, right? So they're getting more and more into that functional training and stuff that I like with Paul Chek stuff is basic patterns. Can you push? Can you pull? With one side of the body, and then can you carry heavy stuff, carries like that, squats and rotation. Those are basic patterns that people need to be able to do. And even in a gym environment, everybody likes to push, right? I mean, they don't really like to pull. And if they do pull, it's usually sitting and pulling, which is very different from standing and pulling, and then pulling from one side of the body. But that's what life is. If I'm going to go start my lawnmower, I'm bending, twisting, rotating, and pulling from one side of my body. So, that's when people get hurt from doing something like that. And that's what I try to get when my assessments and when my training is to get those rotation patterns and transfer of force patterns. Because it's even going to come into things when you push something. If you're going to push something really, really powerful with a punch, you're going to rear back first and get some of that power to transfer through. So all those patterns come into play in real world stuff.
See, I'm going to take an interesting segue because I was thinking about this the other day, in that in the fitness industry we argue an awful lot about what is functional and what is not functional, and I think I get a huge amount of my functional benefit in terms of movement because I play a sport. So I play a sport where I always have to rotate, crouch, bend, crawl, lie, sprint, jump, and it takes me through all those planes. So when I'm in the gym, I'm not overly concerned about movement in the gym. I just kind of need to stimulate some strength, and for me, hopefully some hypertrophy stimulation.
Hmm.
And if I'm working quite largely in the sagittal plane a lot of the time through quite normal movements, I don't get overly concerned about it. But if I look on the flip side of the average gym goer, let's just look at someone that goes 4 days a week, trains, let's say, quite like a traditional bodybuilding weight program. There's probably a huge argument there to throw in some functional based training with them, because they're probably not twisting enough. They're probably not rotating through height, various different height allowances enough. So, with me and my example, would you be worried about functional movement as much? And with the other example, would you be more concerned?
So let's take in regards to the first one, right? So people who go into the gym, and I think the training industry and the fitness industry has really come a long way, which is awesome to see. From, in my time, people went to the gym. It was mostly for hypertrophy, right? Changing how you look in your body, and but they soon realized that just because you have a great six pack doesn't mean that you're going to be a good athlete or a great performer or not get hurt. But there comes a dividing line in regards to where you have to break off your training. Because I'll say to people, do you want to go be a bodybuilder or do you want to go be this type of athlete? Because your training has to separate at this point, right? So bodybuilders going for the look, not so much the function of going into a sport, right? But yeah, I think that people today, they get into the gym and start to exercise, which I really commend them for, because that's a positive step for them to take, right? But unfortunately, usually it's movements that are done on machines and it's controlled, which may be good to start with first if you don't have the ability to control things. Then I think that's where you can work with a trainer who can take you outside of your comfort zone, but do it safely. But then, yeah, you're doing on a treadmill or an elliptical, right? And it's just this forward motion that you do, and you're probably watching a TV or holding on to something, so you're not rotating really. And there's no variability. With variability, there's no change in the surface that you're walking on or the area of space that you're training in. And when you get out into the real world, stuff hits you from all sides, right? And then very rarely do we do universal movements. When we push or pull something, it's not often with two hands. It's usually just one, reaching for your car keys or tying your shoe, doing things like that. So there's always bending, twisting, and rotating. So I always incorporate those into my program to make a better functioning person and athlete outside. But also I think that when you train like that, I can take your hypertrophy development even higher, because you're just training patterns that you're not used to, right? And then if I go from a standpoint of an athlete who does those patterns out on the field, and you're bending, twisting, rotating, pressing, crawling, and stuff like that, yeah, then I think that you don't have to do as much inside the gym when you do that, and you can go more from a hypertrophy. But I just look at the average person out in the world. I mean, how often do we climb anything, or do we hop or jump or do anything outside of those patterns at all?
Sure.
Right? So I think that you have to mix these worlds together. I see runners who are really great at running, but they don't really transfer over and do strength training or any type of functional training as well, because they just say, well, if I'm going to be a better runner, I'm just going to run. But we know now that the contention is you'll be a better badass runner if you do these other things in conjunction with it. But sure. I see these people that look great on the outside, but they get hurt a lot on the inside for when they leave the gym, and they can't do basic functional patterns. The overhead squat looks like they're stuck in cement, and they can't roll from the back to the stomach, or they can't even get into like this simple kind of cross-body crawling pattern. I think learning to master your own body and your own body weight is something that is harder to do, and I think that's why people don't do it. Like, I mean, it's easier to sit down and do a pull down, and it's tough as hell to do a pull up, right? It's a totally different dynamic.
Everyone shies away from pull ups, man.
So yeah, we don't want to do so. If we're not good at it, we'll say, "Oh, I'm just not good at it. I'm not strong enough. Can't do that." And it's people who can do a really good bench press, but struggle with a push-up. Yeah. So a push-up is a very different pattern than a bench press when you do that. Same thing with a deadlift as opposed to just a seated row that you do. I think that getting people to get into these basic patterns of movement is really key. And one of the easiest ways to do that is, I'm sure you're familiar with Dan John. I mean, he works with the Kettlebell Fever a lot, and he's a fantastic strength coach, fitness coach. And I found it to be true where he says, if you give me 3 weeks, I can totally change your body by teaching you how to carry something. Carrying stuff is the biggest change in a person's body because it's something we don't do often when we train, but it's something you do all the time in real life, so it carries over. And it's something that's easy to do and has a low threshold risk of injury to do it.
Nice. Okay, I've got to wrap up this show shortly because I myself actually have something on after this. We had one final question that I sent you. It was quite detailed. Did you want to cover it?
Yeah, if you just refresh my memory, I think I will cover it real quick.
It was the last one. I'll give you.
Let me look.
I'll give you a couple of minutes. So this was a question by Ben Gunn, and he said, "What are your top 5 movements to master, and where would you begin with these movements, as in foundation exercises?" Then he moves on. It's almost like the question's broken. Figuring you must get massive cases of dysfunction coming from everyone, I'd love to hear your approach to managing a client who has a lot going on. So a client presents with a history, past recurring ankle inversion sprains from years of basketball, past patella tendonitis on the left leg, and previous left L4, L5 disc compression issues. Upon observation, you note that the right leg is shorter by about 2 centimeters than the left. A heel wedge is used, a very limited dorsiflexion right ankle. Right foot is very turned out standing and walking, notably larger VMO and VM development than the left, seems underdeveloped. Pelvis is tilted anteriorly, very weak hip flexors, cannot sustain weight on the own limb for long, complains of very tight hips, particularly on the right. Suspected FIA but refuses a scan, and glutes getting out hustled by the hamstrings a lot. Exaggerated lordosis, kyphotic and rolled. How would you approach and prioritize this treatment? Now that is a huge laundry list of stuff.
Yeah, and that's quite common of people that I see where there's just a whole stack of different things, and I look at those as just compensations that the body has been putting down over time as a result of a past injury or instability. And, the harder we push ourselves without the requisite stability, the more the body has to now compensate. So when if I look if there's a lot of joint jams or compensations in the body, I'm always going to look at the center intrinsic stabilization of the body first, the kind of the baseline fundamental system that you need to have turned on first. And that's what I call your intrinsic core. And the intrinsic core is your inner cylinder of powerhouse, badass stability. So that's what we call intra-abdominal pressure, like a balloon that's inflated up and gives you mad power here. And that includes the diaphragm on top, the pelvic floor on the bottom, just like this piston that coming here for pressure, and then wrapping around you the cylinder this way, your front, rectus abdominis, transverse abdominis, and the small muscles in your back. So this is the powerhouse cylinder. If you've got a lot of dysfunction in your body and you feel like you're chasing a lot of things, I know this cylinder is dysfunctional. Something is off of these 4 that have to work together. And very often, it's the ones that wrap you this way, right? And then, so if you lose this wrap, the very first thing that you'll start to do to cheat is you'll hold your breath from this up top. So this one will work more with breath to make up for what doesn't work here. Okay? And if you don't have this, then you don't have the ability to control this force transmission in the body. So then I have to look at those afterwards as compensation mechanisms. So first thing I work with is this, because if I don't fix this, all the other things that I'm going to do for you, even though they're beneficial, they're not going to hold, in my opinion, or they're not going to be as effective because you don't have this safety first. This comes first. I don't do anything else until this comes online. And so let's say that this is dysfunctional, then your body has to use these other sling systems or fascial systems in the body. And then I'd have to look and see through movement how you go. So he mentioned that his left ankle leg is bothering him, but his opposite hip is bothering him. I think the right side that's bothering him. So I automatically know there's a problem with transmission of force going across the body this way. Right? So then we start to look at these subsystems of movement, these sling systems that control rotation and force transmission that way. So when I work with people, I always go from a baseline of the intrinsics, and then I put together the other subsystems of movement that I teach about in my course, because now I know these guys have to take up the slack. And that's how your body learns to move. That's how your body has learned to function, by these subsystems. And if I can put these together, because it's patterns that work together, not just isolated regions. So there's no way he's going to benefit from just releasing the ankle or releasing the tight hip and not integrating the stability in the center, because it's just going to come back. And if you've got a FAI, or femoral acetabular impingement syndrome, that's called, then that means that you've got a lack of major stability in that particular hip that you're going on. So okay. I know that I have to put you down. The easiest way that I can see that is to watch, breathe, and then watch you roll. That's okay. Everybody gets that. You come in with a hangnail and you got pain in your pinky and nobody can figure it out. I'm watching you roll, and I'm doing an overhead squat, and I'm watching you breathe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so like almost I can summarize a lot of that, just how I would work with someone. If I get a laundry list of symptoms, let's say it's bloating, headaches, water retention, joint pain, etc., I'm not going to look at them. I'm going to go for the root cause of the problem, which is quite often the gut permeability, right, immune system, and I attack that, and a lot of the time the symptoms will go away. And it's just like you're doing. You're looking at this laundry list of pain and insufficiencies, and you're going, well, I still need to make the person strong from the core. I still need to make them move properly. I still need to make sure things are activated and communicate efficiently.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. That's correct. Right? So, I mean, all those other things you can attack and you can probably make a change on, but is it going to stick? And if it doesn't, well, then that's an indication that you probably got to go deeper and get that fundamental foundation that you go through. And I just call it the ABCs of movement, right? I mean, if you want to learn to read, you got to learn your alphabet first. And then once you learn to read, then you can practice, get better at it, and then you can go, and next thing you know, you can be reading Shakespeare if you want. So the problem I see is that people move like they don't even know their alphabet yet, and then they get with some professionals and they say, okay, we're going to go over here and we're going to start to read Macbeth. And you're like, what the F? I have no idea what I'm reading. I just can't do it. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the standing on a stability ball and doing a squat because you saw it on YouTube kind of thing, as opposed to what the person really needs. And once they get the fundamentals and the basics, they can learn very quickly to do that. And the ABCs of everything is that intrinsic core. And then the other place I would look is the neck. The neck rules the movement road, because wherever you want to move, you've got to look at first. So this is a pivotal player in the stability of the core. And not many people look there, because if his hip hurts and his ankle hurts, where is most people going to look? They're going to look at the hip and the ankle. But of course, I look at the neck and the core first.
Okay, Perry, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a pleasure. We've learned some really, really cool stuff. I think, more than anything, people are going to have a bit of an eye-opener about their kind of movement. And I think a lot of the stuff that I talk about in nutrition, we have to have a bit of a Pinocchio moment with ourselves, and we have to be very honest with how we function as an individual, and we have to look at ourselves. Okay, the reason why I'm in pain is because I'm not addressing the way that my body functions. I need to know. I know that I should be doing more mobility, stability, X, Y, Z work. You know, the classic with a lot of people that go to the gym is sort of, especially in guys, is anterior shoulder pain. You know, it's not the anterior shoulder with the problem, it's your posture, it's the stability of the shoulder, it's been an overemphasis of anterior based work and lack of posterior, lack of scapular strength, all that kind of stuff. And it just takes an honest person to say, do you know what? Yeah, I need to do that stuff. I need to invest a good 2 or 3 months to correct that kind of movement and the pain and the instability. And then I can kind of continue on as I was with a few tweaks to make sure it doesn't happen again. Perry, if people want to find out more about your work, where do they go? What are the best places to hunt you down?
It's not hard to find, which is the idea. If you just go into the internet and you type in "Stop Chasing Pain," you'll come up and you'll see the website first of all, and then that will link you to all of my social media outlets. I'm pretty much on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube. I'm all over the place. And you can link to the workshops and different seminars that I have available. And I have a membership site that's going to be ready very soon. It's not up yet, but you can come on in and get some extra member content. And then, of course, you can link to my podcast, which you're going to be a guest on mine. Thank you very much. To talk about the wonderful work that you do as well. And, you know, my podcast is stopchasingpain.com. And I have 103 episodes up.
Wow.
As of now. So there's a lot of people in there that are just sharing what they love to do. And people can reach out to me directly through that or through social media, and I'll get back to you. But I had fun, and I appreciate the opportunity just to at least expose people to a different way of thinking. Even if they don't agree with it, they can see that, you know, there's another way that you can look at the body. And my whole contention is that just because you're suffering in pain and nobody can figure out doesn't mean you still can't take back control and empower yourself and learn to feel better. And in my mind, it's learning to move smarter, move better, and then you can begin to feel great.
Awesome. Well, guys, you heard it. Please go and check out Perry's work if you're interested to hear more. Please take some action on what we've talked about, which is more important. If you have a question for the podcast, then please email in and tell us. Make sure you put the subject line podcast. The email is bencoomber@gmail.com. Me and Rachel will be on the show next week, and then my guest after that will be Ben Escrow, and we'll be talking about training parameters and different opinions on the evolving research that we keep seeing with basically getting in the gym and hustling some iron. Perry, again, thank you very much from me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I will speak to you lovely people soon. Ciao. Hey, everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 111. Now, the show's going to take a slightly different slant today. I hope you don't mind. I do quite a few interviews here and there these days on other people's podcasts and sort of other platforms.